My parents refused to babysit my children. Knowing that my wife had passed away and I was going in for surgery, they went to a concert instead. Hi Reddit. Before I dive into this story, I just want to say, if you're reading this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The channel isn't getting as many views lately, and it really helps us keep posting stories like this. Honestly, you won't believe the level of nonsense my family has put me through, so stick around till the end. So, let me start from the beginning. My name is Nick, I'm 32, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. I work as a sales manager for a sports company, and I've done pretty well for myself. I didn't take the traditional route, no college degree, just straight into the workforce. At first, my parents, Henry and Susan, made it clear they thought I was a disappointment. Meanwhile, my younger brother Alex was the golden child. He was the one who could do no wrong, the one who got all the praise, the attention, and the admiration. He was the one they were proud of. Growing up, I was always the extra son. Alex was the straight A student, the one who played soccer, the one they took endless pictures of. I was the one who had to take the bus while they bought Alex his first car. I was the one who had to get a part-time job at 16 because my parents didn't want to spoil me, while Alex got a fully paid college education. And yet, despite everything, I still tried to be the good son. After high school, I didn't go to college. Instead, I started working, grinding my way up the corporate ladder. I built a solid career, became financially independent, and even managed to buy my own house. But none of that mattered to my parents. To them, I was still the one who took the easy way out. Meanwhile, Alex floundered in college, changed majors 3 times, and ended up in a mediocre job that he constantly complained about. Still, my parents acted like he was the second coming of Steve Jobs. Life threw me a curveball when my wife passed away unexpectedly 4 years ago, leaving me a single father to our twin boys. I was devastated, but I had to keep going for my kids. And despite everything, I still supported my parents financially. Every single month, I sent them $3,500 so they could live comfortably after their early retirement. Yeah, you read that right. The disappointment son was the one keeping them afloat. Meanwhile, Alex? He contributed nothing. But somehow that was fine. I never asked for a thank you. But I also never expected what happened next. I was over at my parents' house one day, just a regular Sunday visit with my boys. We were sitting in the living room when my mom casually dropped a bombshell on me. Oh, by the way, we're thinking about refinancing the house so we can help Alex buy a new place. You know, so he can finally settle down. I blinked. Wait, what? My dad nodded like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. Yeah, we figured since you've already got your own place and you're doing well, it makes sense for us to help Alex now. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. So, let me get this straight. You want to take out a loan on your house, the house that I helped pay for, so you can give Alex money for a down payment? My mom gave me that condescending smile she always used when I was being difficult. Nick, it's only fair. You've always been more independent. Alex just needs a little extra support. I could feel my blood boiling. Extra support? He's 30 years old. He has a job. Why doesn't he save his own money? My dad sighed like he was so tired of me. It's different for him. He's had a harder time finding his footing. Oh, you mean because he's never had to work for anything? Because every time he made a mistake, you bailed him out? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. And let me guess, you expect me to keep sending you money every month while you do this? They exchanged a look, and that's when I realized they had fully expected me to just go along with it. Nick, we're family, my mom said. And Alex is your brother. We should all want the best for each other. That was it. That was the moment something inside me just snapped. For 16 years, I've been paying my own way. I didn't get a free ride like Alex. I didn't get my tuition covered. I didn't get a car handed to me. And yet, I'm the one supporting you. Not Alex. Me. And now, you want to use the money I helped provide to give him another free pass. My dad's face darkened. Watch your tone, Nick. No, I shot back. I'm done. I'm done being your personal ATM. If you want to refinance your house, go ahead. But don't expect another dime from me. My mom gasped like I'd just announced I was setting fire to their house. Nick, don't be dramatic. We depend on that money. Then maybe you should have thought about that before deciding to play favorites for 30 years. I grabbed my kids and left. On the drive home, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I had finally cut a chain that had been dragging me down for years. And sure enough, the calls started coming in. First, my mom, with her guilt trips. Nick, we're family. You can't just abandon us. Then my dad, with his silent disappointment. Then Alex, playing the victim, acting like I was personally ruining his life by not funding his new home. I ignored them all. A week later, I got another call. This time, from my mom, her voice frantic. Nick, we need to talk. It's about the house. I sighed. What now? She hesitated. We didn't qualify for the refinance. They said our finances weren't stable enough. Oh, so now it's a problem? I didn't say anything, just waited for her to get to the point. Can we just go back to how things were? She finally asked. You're doing so well, honey, and we really need your support. I let out a short laugh. You mean, go back to me paying your bills while you give Alex everything he wants? Yeah, no thanks. Nick, please, we're your parents. And I was your son for 32 years, and you never treated me like one. Figure it out. And with that, I hung up. It's been 3 months now, and they're still trying to wear me down. But I haven't given in. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. And it feels damn good. The pain had started as a dull ache, nothing major, just an annoying little twist in my stomach that I figured would go away on its own. I didn't have time to be sick. I had 2 4-year-olds depending on me, a demanding job, and no backup. There was no luxury in my life for rest or even concern. By the next day, the pain had sharpened. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It felt like something inside me was trying to tear its way out. Still, I pushed through. I got the kids dressed, made breakfast, packed their bags for daycare, and drove them over. I clenched my teeth the whole way, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, but I refused to acknowledge what my body was telling me. At work, I lasted maybe an hour before the pain became unbearable. Sweat dripped down my temples, and every breath sent a stabbing sensation through my side. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to ride it out, until my coworker, Dave, took one look at me and swore under his breath. Nick, you look like you're about to pass out. You need a doctor. I shook my head. I just need a minute. I'll be fine. Like hell you will. He shot back, already pulling out his phone. I'm calling an ambulance. I tried to protest, but a fresh wave of pain hit, worse than anything before. My vision blurred, and for a second, I thought I might actually black out. The hospital ride was a blur of flashing lights and concerned voices. The paramedics asked me questions, but I could barely answer. The only thing running through my head was my kids. I needed to pick them up. I couldn't be here. Then the doctor came in, and suddenly, none of that mattered anymore. Nick, your appendix has ruptured. You have a serious infection spreading through your abdomen. We need to operate immediately. Ruptured. Infection. Urgent surgery. Those words hit me like a truck. I wasn't a doctor, but even I knew this was bad. People died from this. How bad? I forced out, my voice barely more than a whisper. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. Without surgery, you won't make it. Even with it, there are risks. You've got a nasty infection already spreading. We need to get in there now. I felt my stomach drop. The only thought in my mind was my boys. They were at daycare, waiting for me to pick them up. I couldn't just disappear. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I scrolled to my mom's number. I hit call and pressed the phone to my ear. She picked up on the third ring. Nick, this isn't a good time. Mom, I need help. I gasped, my voice barely holding steady. I'm in the hospital. My appendix ruptured. They're taking me into emergency surgery. I need you and Dad to pick up the boys and keep them for the night. There was a pause, then the sound of her sighing heavily, like I had just asked her to cancel a spa day for something trivial. Oh, Nick, she said, exasperated. We have tickets to the Billy Joel concert tonight. Do you know how much those cost us? I thought I must have misheard her. My vision was swimming, my body was shaking, and she was talking about concert tickets. Mom, I might not. My throat closed up. I couldn't even say it out loud. I don't have anyone else. I need you to take the kids. She let out a long breath. Then I heard my dad's voice in the background. What does he want now? He's in the hospital or something, she replied, like I was calling about a parking ticket. Again, my dad sounded genuinely annoyed. Jesus, Nick, we can't solve your problems all the time. We deserve to enjoy ourselves for once. I gripped the phone tighter, my nails digging into my palm. Dad, I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for favors. I just need you to take care of your grandkids for one night while I get life-saving surgery. Please. Silence. Then a scoff. We have plans, Nick, my mom said, like I was being unreasonable. You should have been more responsible. The line clicked. She had hung up. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, not just from fear, but from a rage so deep I could barely breathe. They weren't coming. A nurse walked in at that moment, probably to prep me for surgery, but I wasn't even listening. My hands were shaking as I dialed the daycare next. It rang twice before the receptionist answered. Oh, Mr. Callahan. We were wondering when you were coming for the boys. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. There's an emergency. I'm in the hospital. Can you keep them for a little longer? Of course, she said quickly. We'll stay open late if we have to. Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting better. I exhaled shakily. At least someone in the world had some basic human decency. A few minutes later, I was being wheeled into surgery. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia took over was my phone screen lighting up with a picture of my boys, their smiling faces frozen in time. The next thing I knew, I was waking up to a dull, all-consuming ache, like my whole torso had been torn open. My throat was raw, and my limbs felt like lead. I turned my head and saw the nurse from before standing by my bed, checking my "4. You're awake," she said gently. "Surgery went well, but you'll be here for a few days to recover." My brain was foggy, sluggish, but one thought pushed its way through. "My kids, they're fine," she assured me. "Your friend Dave picked them up. He said he'll bring them by later when you're feeling better." I felt my body relax for the first time in hours. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. I turned my head slowly and saw my mom's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring. The painkillers dulled the worst of it, but I still felt like I had been hit by a truck. My entire body ached, my throat was dry, and my mind was foggy from the anesthesia. As I lay there, trying to piece everything together, a deep voice broke through the haze. "Hey, buddy, you need anything?" I turned my head slightly and saw a nurse standing by my bed. He was older, maybe in his late 40s, with a strong build and sharp, observant eyes. His name tag read Mark. He had that calm, steady presence that told me he had seen a lot in life. My voice cracked, and I had to swallow before trying again. "My kids." He nodded like he already knew. "Your friend Dave picked them up. He left a note for you. Said he's keeping them at his place for now. But I get the feeling you're looking for something more permanent, at least while you're stuck here." I exhaled slowly, relief mixing with exhaustion. "Yeah, I don't have family who can help." Mark scoffed. "Family ain't always blood, kid. And blood ain't always family." I didn't have the energy to respond, but I appreciated the sentiment. "You got childcare lined up for them while you recover?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. I was hoping to figure something out when I got out of here, but you won't be in any shape to chase after 2 4-year-olds for a while." Mark finished for me. I closed my eyes for a second, the reality of it settling in. I had no one. My parents had made that painfully clear. Mark was silent for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "I might have a solution. My cousin Olivia runs an emergency childcare service. It's mainly for people in tough spots, single parents, hospital stays, that kind of thing. She's no nonsense, but she's got a good heart." I opened my eyes and stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" He shrugged. "Because someone should. And because I've seen enough to know that good dads don't always get the support they deserve." I couldn't even respond to that. For so long, I had felt like I was carrying everything alone, like no one in the world gave a damn whether I sank or swam. But here was a complete stranger, offering help without expecting anything in return. He stepped away to make the call, and I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling something I hadn't in a long time: gratitude. Less than an hour later, Olivia arrived. She was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mark says you've got 2 little ones who need looking after while you recover," she said. I nodded. "Josh and Ethan. They're 4. She nodded thoughtfully. "Good ages. Still young enough to be flexible, but old enough to understand simple rules. I run a small childcare program out of my home. It's structured, safe, and I don't tolerate nonsense. If they stay with me, they'll have a routine, meals, playtime, and a quiet space for naps. Does that sound okay to you?" I felt like I was talking to a general, but something about her made me trust her immediately. She wasn't just doing this out of pity. She was the kind of person who knew how to handle things. "They're good kids," I said, my voice rough. "A little wild sometimes, but good." She actually smiled a little at that. "Most kids are. I'll meet them at Dave's and get them settled tonight. You focus on getting better." I didn't know how to thank her, so I just said, "I appreciate it. More than you know." She nodded once and left. As soon as the door shut, I turned to my phone. There were unread messages from my mom. Guilt trips, thinly veiled demands, the usual. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I opened my banking app and quickly typed a message to my bank. "Stop all transfers to the parents." Then I pulled up my mom's number and typed out the last message I would ever send her. "I will not give you another cent. You are strangers to me." I hit send, put my phone down, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt free. The operation lasted 4 hours. 4 long, grueling hours where my body fought to survive against an infection that had already started to spread. The doctors later told me that if I had waited even a few more hours before coming in, I wouldn't have made it. The thought chilled me to the core. I had been so close to leaving my boys without a father, all because I had convinced myself that I had to handle everything on my own. When I finally came to, the pain was dull but constant, a deep, aching reminder that my body had been torn apart and stitched back together. My throat was dry, my head heavy, and it took me a minute to realize where I was. The hospital room was dimly lit, the beeping of monitors the only sound in the background. I turned my head slightly and saw my phone on the bedside table, screen dark, but something about it made my stomach sink. I reached for it, wincing as the movement pulled at my stitches. The moment I turned it on, the screen flooded with notifications. 31 missed calls, 47 unread messages, all from my parents. For a second, I just stared at the numbers. Not a single missed call from them before my surgery when I had begged them for help. Not a single message checking if I had even survived the operation. But now, after cutting them off financially, suddenly they cared. I exhaled slowly and started scrolling through the messages, my expression growing darker with each one. How could you? We're in mortgage trouble because of you. Cruise tickets are already bought. How can we get our money back? We gave you our best years, and you betrayed us. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Not a single word about my health, about the fact that I had nearly died on an operating table. Nothing about my boys or whether they were okay. Just panic over money, over their precious vacation plans, over the fact that the son they had taken for granted had finally decided he had enough. I clenched the phone in my hand, my jaw tightening. I should have been furious, but all I felt was exhaustion. This was who they were. This was who they had always been. I had just been too blind to fully accept it until now. As I was about to put the phone down, it buzzed again. Another call. But this time, it wasn't from my parents. It was from Alex. I hesitated before answering, my voice hoarse from hours of being unconscious. Yeah. Jesus. Nick. What the hell is going on? He said, his voice carrying that same mix of arrogance and cluelessness it always did. Mom and Dad are losing it. They said you had some minor procedure, and now you're screwing them over financially. What did you do? I let out a bitter laugh, rubbing my eyes. Minor procedure? My appendix ruptured, Alex. The infection was bad. The doctors weren't even sure I'd make it. Silence. I continued, my voice flat. I called them before surgery, begged them to take care of the twins. You know what they said? I could hear Alex breathing on the other end, but he didn't respond. They said they had concert tickets, that they deserved to enjoy themselves, that they couldn't solve my problems all the time. And then they hung up. More silence. I sighed, shaking my head. I've been sending them $3,500 a month for years, Alex. Years. Paying their bills while raising 2 kids alone. And the one time I needed them, they rolled their eyes and told me they had better things to do. So yeah, I cut them off. And now they're freaking out because they actually have to be responsible for themselves for once. Alex finally spoke, but his voice was quieter. I didn't know you were giving them that much money. Of course you didn't, I said. Because they never told you. They let you believe I was the selfish one while I was the one keeping them afloat. And now that their safety net is gone, they're acting like I betrayed them. He let out a slow breath. Look, I don't know what to say, man. You don't have to say anything, I muttered. Just don't ask me to fix it. I'm done. I hung up before he could respond, tossing my phone onto the bed beside me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel doubt. I just felt done. Going home was painful. Every movement felt like my insides were being torn apart again. But despite the discomfort, all I felt was relief. The hospital had been suffocating, a constant reminder of how close I had come to leaving my kids without a father. But now, stepping into my own house, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Olivia was already there with the twins, waiting for me. The moment Josh and Ethan saw me, they ran over, their little arms wrapping around my legs with surprising force. Daddy, we missed you, Ethan shouted. I winced as pain shot through my abdomen, but I forced a smile and gently hugged them back. I missed you too, buddies. Olivia gave me a knowing look and nudged the boys. Remember what we talked about? Daddy needs to rest, so we have to be extra gentle, okay? They both nodded seriously, their big eyes full of concern. Are you still sick, Daddy? Josh asked. I ruffled his hair, swallowing down the lump in my throat. Not anymore, buddy. I just need to rest a little. Olivia stayed for a while, helping me settle back in. The house was spotless, which I realized must have been her doing. She had taken care of the kids, cleaned up, even stocked the fridge. I barely knew her, yet she had done more for me in the past few days than my own parents ever had. As the boys ran off to play, she turned to me, arms crossed. You need help. You're still recovering, and you can't be chasing after 2 4-year-olds all day. I nodded. I know. That was the first decision I made. I hired a nanny for the next few months, someone to take care of the boys while I healed. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let my pride get in the way of doing what was best for them. The second decision was one I should have made a long time ago. I called my lawyer and set up a will. Sitting in that hospital bed, the only thing I could think about was what would happen to my kids if I didn't make it. And the thought of them ending up with my parents made my stomach turn. I made it clear in legal terms, if anything happened to me, Josh and Ethan would go to my best friend Dave. He had always been there for me, always treated my boys like family. He was the only person I trusted. And the last decision? That one was easy. I blocked my parents' numbers. Every single one. I was done with the guilt, done with the manipulation. They had made their choice, and now I was making mine. I didn't need them, and neither did my kids. Alex, I didn't block completely, but I kept my distance. He wasn't blameless in all of this. He had been willfully ignorant for years, happy to live in the comfort of being the favored son while I carried all the weight. If he wanted to pretend things could go back to normal, that was his problem. But I wasn't going to be a part of it. As I lay in bed that night, sore but finally at peace, I listened to the soft sounds of my boys sleeping down the hall. For the first time in my life, I felt free. It didn't take long for reality to hit my parents like a freight train. Without my $3,500 a month padding their lifestyle, they were left with nothing but their own reckless financial decisions. I didn't bother checking in, but I didn't have to. The silence itself told me everything. No calls, no guilt-tripping texts, just an eerie quiet from the people who used to demand so much from me. Then, about 2 months after I had cut them off, Alex called. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "They're in trouble," he blurted out the moment I picked up. I leaned back against the couch, rubbing my temple. "Yeah? What else is new?" "No, Nick, I mean real trouble," he insisted. "Mom called me crying. They got an eviction notice. They can't pay the mortgage without your money. They already sold the boat, the Florida house, Dad's watches, everything. But it's not enough. The bank is forcing them to sell the house." I should have felt something. Pity maybe. A little satisfaction, even. But all I felt was exhaustion. "Sounds like their problem," I said flatly. Alex hesitated. "Come on, man. They're our parents." I let out a bitter laugh. "No, Alex. They were your parents. They only kept me around because I was useful. The second I needed them, they threw me away like trash. Now they're paying the price for it." He went quiet, and for once, I thought he might actually be processing what I was saying. But of course, it wasn't over. That night, my phone rang again. My mother's number. I had unblocked her out of morbid curiosity, but the moment I saw her name flashing on the screen, I knew exactly what this was about. I picked up and didn't say a word. She was already crying. "Nick, we always thought you were joking about not helping us. We never thought you would actually do this to us." I sighed, shaking my head. "You mean you never thought I'd finally stand up for myself?" "Nick, please," she sobbed. "We have nowhere to go. The house is going to be sold in 2 months. Where are we supposed to live?" I could hear my father in the background, his voice tight with anger. "This is your fault. If you hadn't cut us off." I exhaled sharply, already tired of the conversation. "If I hadn't cut you off, I'd be dead, Dad. You do remember that I was literally fighting for my life, right? Or does that not matter because it was inconvenient for you?" Silence. Finally, my father spoke again, but this time, there was no anger, just quiet desperation. "Nick, we're your parents." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before I responded. "No. You're just 2 people who used me until I had nothing left to give. And now that you're out of options, you're coming back, expecting me to fix it." "Nick, please," my mother whispered. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. "Not my problem. You decided I was a stranger to you. I'm just making sure you get exactly what you wanted." I hung up. And just like that, the last thread connecting me to them was gone. I had spent years being their safety net, their insurance policy, their backup plan. But I wasn't that person anymore. They were on their own. And for the first time in my life, so was I. The call came early in the morning. I saw Alex's name on my phone and ignored it at first, assuming it was another guilt trip. But then he called again. And again. By the 4th call, I sighed and picked up. "Nick, it's Dad," Alex said, his voice strained. He had a heart attack. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the ceiling, letting the words settle in. "He's in the hospital," Alex continued. "Mom's freaking out. They need money for the surgery. 40,000. I almost laughed at the irony. Now they needed me again. I exhaled slowly. "Which hospital?" Alex hesitated, probably surprised I was even asking. "St. Mary's. I'll be there in an hour." I didn't rush. I got the twins dressed, made them breakfast, and arranged for the nanny to stay with them a little longer. Then I drove to the hospital at a steady, unhurried pace. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't panicked. I felt absolutely nothing. When I walked into the hospital room, my mother's face lit up like she had just been saved. She rushed toward me, grabbing my hands like we were still family. "Oh, Nick, thank God. We need." I pulled my hands away. "Where is he?" She blinked at my reaction but pointed toward the hospital bed. My father lay there, looking weaker than I had ever seen him. His skin was pale, his breathing labored. He opened his eyes slightly when he heard my voice, but there was no warmth in them, just expectation. "We need 40,000 for the surgery," my mother said desperately. "They won't do the full procedure without it. Insurance won't cover everything, and we." I raised a hand, cutting her off. I turned to my father, meeting his tired gaze. "Do you remember when I was dying on the operating table?" I asked, my voice calm. "When I called you, begging for help, and you told me you deserve to enjoy yourselves instead? My mother sucked in a sharp breath. Nick, that's not the same. I tilted my head slightly, watching her. Isn't it? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I turned back to my father. You taught me an important lesson that day, that some people don't deserve to be saved. His breathing quickened slightly. You wouldn't, he rasped. I held his gaze. I would. And I am. My mother clutched my arm. Nick, please. I gently pried her fingers off me. Try a charity, I said simply. Then I turned and walked out, leaving them frozen in shock. For the first time in my life, I was truly free. Life moved on, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living instead of just surviving. I found a balance between work, taking care of my boys, and even making time for myself. I got back into running, started lifting weights again, and finally stopped feeling like I was carrying the weight of the world alone. The boys thrived, growing more independent, their laughter filling the house in a way that made every sacrifice worth it. Alex, once so blind to our parents' ways, started pulling away from them too. He saw it now. The manipulation, the entitlement, the way they had used me for years while keeping him in the dark. I think he hated himself a little for not realizing it sooner. We weren't close, not the way some brothers were, but we kept in touch. Maybe, with time, we could rebuild something real. As for my parents, they lost the house. The same house they had once made me feel like an outsider in. The same house they thought they could never live without. Their boat was gone, their Florida vacation home a distant memory, and their so-called lifestyle stripped down to its bare bones. They were forced to move into a small rented apartment, a far cry from the luxury they had once enjoyed at my expense. They tried to reach out again, not with demands this time, but with something that almost resembled humility. Almost. Nick, my mother said over the phone one afternoon, we need a place to live. We've learned our lesson, truly. We can't afford anything else right now, and she hesitated, lowering her voice as if it pained her to say the next part. Would you consider renting us your old house? I should have said no. Every instinct in me told me to walk away and never look back. But instead, I thought about it carefully. If I let them, it would be on my terms. Fine, I finally said. But there are conditions. There was a long silence before my father spoke. What conditions? First, you meet with a financial counselor. I want to see proof that you're actually learning how to manage your money instead of waiting for someone else to fix your mess. Another silence. Second, I continued. No luxury purchases. No new watches, no trips, no ridiculous spending. The second I find out you're wasting money, the deal is off. My mother let out a shaky breath. We understand. And last, I said firmly, you will not see your grandkids until I decide you've proven you've changed. That means actual effort, not just words. I could hear my mother start to protest, but my father stopped her. We accept, he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. I didn't respond right away. Maybe part of me had wanted them to reject the offer so I wouldn't have to think about them at all. But they agreed. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply me making sure that, this time, I was in control. Months passed, and I barely thought about them anymore. My focus was where it should have been, on my boys, on our life, on the future I was building without the weight of the past dragging me down. One evening, I took Josh and Ethan to the park. The air was warm, the sky a dusky blue, and fireflies danced in the grass. Daddy, look, Josh whispered excitedly, cupping his hands around one. His little fingers trembled slightly as the tiny insect blinked softly in his grasp. I crouched down beside him, watching the light flicker. You know what you have to do now, right? He frowned slightly, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, he opened his hands, and the firefly hovered for a moment before disappearing into the night. I smiled, ruffling his hair. Some things you have to let go of in order to move on. He grinned up at me, then ran back to his brother, laughing. And just like that, I knew I had finally moved on too. So, what do you think, Reddit? Did I do the right thing by setting boundaries, or should I have cut them off completely? Would you have forgiven them, or was their betrayal too deep? Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious to see how you'd handle it.